Hi, this is Krista Moore, and welcome to the Krista Moore Show. This show is brought to you as a new way to learn as I interview industry experts and thought leaders on subjects that are important to your health, your wellness, and your success. For those of you that know me, know that I love to inspire you to be the best that you can be. And so that's why this subject and this topic today is really personal for me. And I am thrilled for you to meet my guest. Dr. Sherene McHenry is a new friend of mine. We just met and instantly became friends. And I just can't wait for you to meet her. Hi, Sherene, how are you?
Great,
Now,
thank you.
yeah, so this subject, Live a Life You Love, it ended up being one of the most popular shows that we've had in 3 years. So I just want you to know that going into it, because this is a subject that so many of us want to hear about. And you wrote the book on it. So I couldn't ask for a better guest.
Thank you.
Please take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience. Have them get to know who you are at your core. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. I'm so excited to be here and that people are excited about this. I imagine that most of you are like me, that you've been miserable and hopefully you've had many times that you have been marvelous. I grew up not really knowing what I liked. I mean, I knew there were things that I liked, but I kind of felt ashamed of liking the spotlight and wanting people's attention. And I played pretty small and I went through and I did what good girls did and just built this career and got into my first job. And I was absolutely miserable. It was a horrible, horrible fit. It didn't use any of my skill sets. And within a year, you can hear the catch in my voice, I was
Yeah.
clinically depressed. And it was a painful time for me. And I used that pain as a motivator to go to counseling. And in counseling, I began to learn to listen to my heart, to listen to what I liked. And to be quite honest, I had to figure out what I didn't like was almost easier than what I did like. So I began to pay attention and I began to move away from what I didn't like and then move towards what I did like. And so I made the, for me, courageous move to leave a good job that I was good at doing to go and get my doctorate so that I could be a professor, because I absolutely loved when I taught a course, when I was speaking, when I was in my first job as a student affairs professional. I love the light bulb of learning that goes on in people's eyes. So I went and I got my doctorate and I became a professor. And it was a good job I was good at doing. I became a tenured full professor, but it never quite was what I had dreamed. But my first fall that I was there, a colleague knocked on the door and she's like, "Hey, somebody backed out of a conference. Would you like to speak?" And without thinking, because I'm the type of person where everything sounds good in the moment, I said, "Sure." And she said, "Great, I'll let him know." And then she walked away. And about 15 minutes later, reality sunk in. And I thought, what have I done? I shouldn't have done that. A little bit of backstory: when I took my only speech class, I was in ninth grade and I got the ninth grade giggles that only a young woman can get. And I could hardly breathe for laughing. And the teacher yelled at me and he said, "Sit down and take an F." And it
Oh my.
oh, was heartbreaking. I felt like white hot tears of shame and I sat down and I said to myself, I don't like to speak. But what I really didn't like was I don't like to be shamed in
Mhm.
front of people. I don't like it in private. And so I didn't even know I liked to speak. And then I spoke and I had so much fun. I went, now that's fun, because I made people laugh. And there was a
Yeah.
part of me that woke up for the first time, Krista.
Yeah, it almost sounds like the real you came out.
Yes,
You know,
yes, that's a
your real light, it shined because you were in the moment, you were doing something that you loved, that you were great at, and you actually felt it from the audience too.
Yes, and it was the first time I'd ever done it. And something inside me woke up. And like you said, I became the best version of me. And so for about 3 years, people would say, every time I'd speak, they go, will you come speak to our group? I'd like, sure. And then one day somebody said, how much would it cost? And I'm like, you can get paid to do that? Oh. And then I figured out people made a living doing it. And for me, that was the steep climb. I was the child of educators, no entrepreneurs. And I really had to learn how, through professional organizations and personal coaching, I had to learn how to become a businesswoman.
Yeah.
And
And that's where I found you. I found you because of how popular you are for your keynotes and within the National Speakers Association in the women's group
thank
in
you.
NSA. And I'm just thrilled that you could share your story, because what I heard in that story is you had a life journey where
Yes.
you had the highs and lows, and there were some risks, and to end up where you are today. And I think when we talk about living a life you love, I don't want to set the stage that it's all going to be easy, because that word love is like, oh, this is wonderful, and I love what I'm doing, but it takes a journey to get there.
Yeah, two thoughts come to mind. Number one of the things that we know is young people today are so stressed out because they grew up in the Oprah age of live your passion, and they have no idea what their passion is. Therefore,
Mhm.
they're terrified to make movement. And for me, it was a process of finding and growing into my passion. I believe firmly that there are always clues. Sometimes I call them breadcrumbs, and it's like follow the breadcrumb. It'll always lead you where you're supposed to go.
Yeah, and
And
I want to dive into that, because I think that that's probably one of the key components of almost building or creating this life plan that you're meant to live. And that I'd like to kind of dive into that in hopes that our listeners today can hear a message of hope, of faith, and inspiration, that they too can live the life that is meant for them, and live more purposeful with more meaning. And I'm excited about that, because I think we can help them get there.
I do too. I love that we are on this journey ourselves and have
Mhm.
taken big and small risks and been courageous along the way. And
That's
there were
right.
times when I wasn't courageous. And yeah, I just can't wait to see
Great.
where this goes and what
So
people are able to
one,
take.
one of the first things that comes to mind is the environment that we're in today, and with COVID and the race discrimination and all of this noise that's out there, that have shifted our mindset, that have changed us emotionally, and I feel have actually given us more time to go inward. And that's why a show like this is popular today, because we're all searching. We're all trying to figure this out. I wanted to hear your perspective on that.
I think that life as we knew it was distracting, perhaps. It ate up all the hours of our day. And now that we're not spending time commuting, now that we're 24/7 with people, I just think that it's kind of like the band-aid is off and we're a little bit more aware of perhaps something is missing and looking for what that might be. And with many people being furloughed, laid off, being let go, with everything that's going on, it's just a real time, I think, where we get to go, okay, so what do I want to do? What invitation is there for me? And people are finding their voices in a brand new way. And I just think it's the right time, and that the pain is great enough that we've been through, that we're more willing to ask ourselves the question and to engage in the process of thinking about
Yeah,
what it
and
is that we want.
having those conversations with others and with ourselves.
Yes, yes. Yes, and
And
I love getting
I was,
around fascinating people who you can have these conversations with.
oh, absolutely, that are kind of get it. Similar to what we were talking about earlier before the show started. We're kind of
Yeah.
on the same plane here. Um, Most of my listeners that know me know that I'm passionate about inspiring others to be their best, and I have kind of a process of self-discovery to help them live the life that they're meant to live, with more purpose and meaning. And it's just kind of my new shift and change. And it's going to take me to a different place in the next 10 years. And there's a lot of risk involved. So I feel personally that I'm at this stage as well, where it's like, okay, what's next? I'm feeling called to do more meaningful work. So that calling, so to speak, that kind of tap on the shoulder, that sense that something just isn't right and something needs to change. What can you tell us about that? And is that a clue?
It is a clue. I call it the whispers of the heart. And I believe that your heart always knows. I believe you can ignore it. I believe you can shove it down. I believe you can self-medicate it into quiet. But the heart always knows. I feel this little catch in my voice.
Mhm.
And if we will listen to our heart, it may not be our end destination, but we know the next clue. We know the next crumb. And I'll be really honest with you, when I was looking at leaving my tenured full professorship, too young to retire, I was terrified.
Mhm.
So terrified. I would cry at the thought that I would not make enough money and that I would go hungry. And I would listen to Janice Stanfield's If I Were Brave. It's a wonderful YouTube video, and it's what would you do if you were brave? And every time I would listen to it, I'd go, I would leave my job. And it took so much courage to take a leap of faith. But I didn't just one day go, I'm going to be a professional speaker. I quit my job and I'm going to go. That I probably would have been hungry at
Yeah.
that point. You know,
Let's
you have to build some runway there.
let's talk about the clues and the signs that we all could be more aware of and look for. When you talk about the desires of your heart, what advice or what direction would you give those that are listening? How do they tap into that? Like,
I
what do you
think
do?
I think it's choosing to be intentional and to listen. And so here's the simplest terms that I put it in that work for me. I
Mhm.
think that we should all be playing with our lives, the games that we've played as a child. And that game was hot, cold. And so if we will just listen to hot, cold, and warm, that's all we need to do. So I'm in my first job. It's a terrible fit. I'm now clinically depressed. Cold, cold, cold. I was searching for something, but I was really far away from it. And nobody said to me, stay away from cold, because when we play this game with other people, when we play it with our heart, we can move toward warm. And, then they'll say warm, warmer, warmer, hot, hot, hot. And
Yeah.
that's what it is if you're in a cold space, let's tell ourselves the truth and begin to say what would be warm. Take a step, follow the crumb,
Mhm.
follow the clue.
You
And if
know,
it's cold, you do it again.
well, what I'm hearing you say too is this movement from, it's an energy feeling as well, but it's like moving from the cold to warm. And it's how the action that you did differently, how that moved you to this warmer space.
Yeah, so for me, I went from I don't want to be a student affairs professional to I want to be a professor. I went from being a professor and going, yeah, this was my dream, but it was warm. And I began to speak and I went hot, hot, hot. Now
Yeah.
that's fun. And
You
so
know,
I want, go ahead.
what do you think about this? Because a lot of people know my story of working in corporate America, and seemingly I look like I had it all, a nice career. I was a VP of sales for a large corporation.
Can't you be happy?
Yeah, like they're thinking I'm happy, right? Because I'm living the dream. I was miserable. I mean, I remember driving to work with the pit in my stomach every day for about 6 months. And as the story goes, that the one day that my boss told me to shut up and sit down is when I left. So I got a pretty good sign by this pit in my stomach that what I was doing wasn't giving me joy and happiness, and I wasn't my best self, and I needed to make a change. But unfortunately, I let that kind of gnaw at me, I think, way longer than I should have. But what it did is it gave me, I was down on the ground. And it gave me this time to really reflect, listen to the desires of my heart, ask myself those questions. And I've told this to you before. What was I doing when I was a child? What did I love? What was I great at? What would I do every day if I didn't get paid? And those are the kinds of thinking I believe get us to start putting a life path together so that we could live a life that we love.
You know,
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there are always clues, and I think that sometimes the only thing that nudges us out of the nest is misery. Something as offensive as somebody telling you to sit down and shut up. You know, if I hadn't been discontent, if it hadn't been a bad fit, I'd still be an unhappy professor speaking part-time
Yes.
and living a life less than what I want. But the pain was great enough and the dream was great enough that I was willing to take a risk. And, you know, my first move was that pit in my stomach and the absolute fear that if I stayed there, which I could do, but the very best part of me, the part that I liked the best, would either go dormant or die. And I wasn't willing to risk that on the first one. And then on the second one, it was I didn't want to live a life that didn't have uh, what I believed that I was created to do. And so, you know, people
Mhm.
thought I was crazy. Who leaves? This is what, who leaves a tenured full professorship? And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I did because it was a good job I was good at doing, but it wasn't a good job for me. And here's what I feel like at the end of the day, I'm the one who answers for the choices that I make. I'm the one who has to wake up every day and live my life. Other people are entitled to their opinions, but nobody else lives my life. Nobody else knows what the clues are. Nobody else knows what burns inside. And we
Yes.
can passively go along and miss it, or we can begin to captain our boat and position ourselves to get to where we want to go.
I love what you said about caring or not caring what other people think. It's kind of how like I interpreted that, because I think that there are a lot of people that what other people think about them holds them back from being who they're meant to be. And
I couldn't agree more.
I was there. I mean, I don't know, there's just like a switch that flips. And maybe it's age. It's like, hey, I'm too old for this to care what other people think. I'm going to be me. But it's a mindset, and it's just a shift that I think is necessary in order to really live the life that you want and that you love. Although we care about other people, and we care about what they think of us, that doesn't go away. But maybe they're not the right friends.
No, and here's what I've noticed is people who are living a life they love, they will encourage you and cheer you on, and they don't compete with you. When
Mhm.
people aren't living a life that they love, maybe it's out of fear for themselves. They send messages that we should play small, and maybe it's fear for you because you're not playing it by the way that they were created and designed to play life. And so I think fear plays a big part, and I think it's easier to pull somebody else's dream down than to do the hard work of figuring out what you
What
want
yours
and then
is. Yeah.
taking the steps to get there.
Yeah,
You know,
boy,
mine
that
was
makes
a long
sense.
journey. It took me from the first time that I spoke till I figured out that you could get paid for it was probably about could make a living was 3 to 5 years. And I left my university position after 18 and a half years. So that's about 13 more years. So, and of positioning myself and acting out of fear and holding on to a job that really wasn't the best fit, but I wasn't ready and I'm going to sleep in peace. And so, what I want to say to anyone who feels like they took too long, like life has passed them by, sleep in peace. We can only get places as quickly as we can get there. But let's open our eyes up. Let's start playing hot and cold. It makes me so sad when people stay in miserable and they wear it like a smelly wool blanket. I don't understand them. And then there are people who stop at warm. And I'm like, hey, if that's where you want to be, I'm okay with that. But if you have something that never goes away. That's the whisper of the soul. It just never goes away.
That,
That is the beacon that is calling you. And until you answer that, you will never fully be happy or fully function at your best. And
that's right.
so, yeah, take the next step, not the end of the marathon, the next step.
Well, and I think it's important to note that it's there's no timeline here. There's no perfect time or best time. We just have to give it to God, so to speak, and it's on His time, right? But I feel like I have been living my entire life to be who I'm meant to be. And I'm at this point where I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to shift. I'm ready to change. And I believe that there's so much more that I can give back based on what I know and I've discovered are my God-given gifts and my strengths. And by giving those back to others, I'm of service, and it's just, what I need to be doing. So now this all might sound kind of foo-foo to some people that are listening. So let's talk about maybe 3 things that they really need to hear. Like, what do they need to take away from today's call? What would be number 1?
I think the number one thing that I would encourage each listener to hear is we get one ride on this beautiful planet. At the end of my life, I don't want to say I wish I would have. I want to lay on my deathbed and say, I'm so glad I did. And I think that's what you and I are both so passionate about. One ride is the first thing.
Well, I think too that when I hear that one ride, I feel like along with that is no regrets. Like, who wants to live with regret? I mean, who wants to be on their deathbed thinking, "Oh, I wish I coulda, shoulda."
Yes,
I mean, that to
to
me
me, that's a
sounds so
nightmare.
miserable.
Well, and we either do the hard work now and we take chances, or we live a life of regret because we didn't listen to the whisper of our souls.
Yeah.
And I think we're always getting choices and chances. And, I know people in their 80s who have made exciting choices that may not be career related anymore, but are still the whispers of their soul. So I don't think we're ever too old or it's ever too late.
I want to add something to the whispers of the soul kind of conversation, because some people don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And I think everyone is different in how they can get quiet about this and go inward. And it might be, training or coursework or something that helps you guide you through that. It might be meditation, in the morning. It might be prayer. It might be yoga for someone, kind of getting into different levels of your mind and your vision through relaxation. But I think we all need to figure out what's going to work for us, because if you're not feeling like you can get those clues or tune into that, I think you got to get quiet, and it's about listening. What do you think?
I completely agree. And my thought is that Janice Danfield song, "What would you do if you were brave? What would you do if you didn't have to worry about making money? What would you do?" It doesn't mean that you're going to chuck it all and don't have to make money, but it's what would you do? And we do have to be quiet, and there are so many distractions. You can fill your day with television. Again, you can fill it with all kinds of substances. But I think that's why, again, this time is so good, because COVID-19 has opened up space in a way that it's never been open, I don't think, since modern technology came into play.
I would agree. I mean, the space has been given to us for this, for sure.
Yeah.
So number 1 was, hey, you got one ride, no regrets.
One ride.
What would number 2 be?
I believe with all my heart that each of us is created for a purpose, and that we will be happiest and function best when we live in that purpose, and that society will be benefited and function best when each of us lives for what our purpose is. And so I think it goes beyond us. I think it's how society functions best. Can you imagine if everybody were doing something they were passionate about and well suited to? And again, it doesn't mean that there aren't drudgery parts of every job, but my father sometimes will say to me, now you have a tough job. And I always think, I don't think so. But for
Yeah.
him, it would be a nightmare tough job. For me, it's just like candy. This is fun.
Well,
I
there's
just
two
like it.
sides of that. When I hear you describing that, two things come to mind for me. One is I'm on the same page as you in terms of we're born with and we're created with a purpose, and it's our destiny to figure out what that is and then live it. That's my belief, hands down. Now, there's some people that, they just don't go there, or they haven't really thought about it that deeply. But look at it a little bit differently. When you're in a job or in a career and you're doing what you're great at and what you love and what gives you joy, then you are at a level of your best.
Yes.
So I love taking people through a lifeline journey of highs and lows in their life, even after 10. When were they at their best? When weren't they feeling so great? And what was happening at that time? As well as do things like strengths finders, and you could do a lot of different assessments to help more discover what your strengths are. And I think those lead to purpose and passion.
I completely agree. And the more we know ourselves, the more we can set ourselves up for success. And for me, again, it's just paying attention. What makes me happy? I think sometimes we feel guilty for doing what makes us happy. We feel guilty for wanting something more. We feel guilty for wanting, for me as a speaker, to be seen. We talked before the show about when I was 10, all I ever wanted to be was a cheerleader and a gymnast. I had
Mhm.
no idea what that meant, but in hindsight, I loved being in front of people performing and people watching me.
And applauding.
Exactly. That's
And
the
so,
thought. I always say, I have the best job ever. I do my job, everybody claps. I'm like, woo, who gets paid? I mean, how many people have the privilege of getting paid at the end of their work?
yeah. Well, and I'd like
Not
to
getting
add
paid,
on to
but getting applauded.
And it's not just the act of being comfortable on stage and having a good voice and a good stage presence. It's the message that you're sending that's really connecting with and impacting others to get them to stand up and to applaud. So that purposeful, sure, it's nice to have the stage and to get recognized for your performance. But that's what's satisfying to you, right?
What is satisfying to me is that I get to impact lives on a very large scale. So my training is as a counselor, but I never wanted to do individual counseling. And a clue that I was not well suited to that was the day I fell asleep on a client. That is telling. That's
Wow.
not good for a counselor to do. Being a professor, small classes in graduate school, that was nice. But now I get to do stuff that goes around the world. I get to speak to large and small audiences. And so I get to paint with a broader brushstroke. So I was wired to want to paint with a broad brushstroke and to help people live happier, healthier lives. I want them to have happy relationships with themselves and with other people. I want them
Mhm.
to do purposeful, meaningful work. I want them to set themselves and people in the workplace up for success. And so for me, a life that has meaning, the audience is delightful, but for me, I have a teacher's heart. And I was told
Yes.
that from the time I was a child. And I love saying, I'll go get a PhD, I'll read 1,000 books, I'll think about it all the time, and I'll tell you the 5 things that'll make a difference in your
Well,
life.
what I heard from what you were describing just now is that how you impact and how you get those God-given gifts back to the world and be at your best is by performing and being on stage, because what's important to you is reaching a broader audience and having impact on as many people as you possibly can. So, playing small and doing that one-on-one isn't your jam.
No, and it was so boring, it put me to sleep.
Exactly.
When I was getting trained My professor said, you don't like your client. I'm like, what are you talking about? I like her. He's like, no, you don't. Look at yourself. I'm looking at my fingers as she's talking. I'm biting my nails. And I just went, you're right. I don't like to sit and listen to people's problems.
I want to bring something up to you because we talked about the two. We got one ride here, so let's make the best of it, and that we were created with a purpose.
Yes.
And when you put those two things together, they're pretty powerful. In terms of how you can have movement down, and you have control over your destiny, so to speak. What would be the third message that you would like to leave the audience with?
Always follow the clues, follow the breadcrumbs. You don't have to be at the top of the mountain. You don't have to know the end. All you need to know is one step, and then you assess, and then there will be another clue. So it's always take a step, assess, head towards warm, and head towards hot. And if you do deviate and you go to cold, you go, oh, I don't like that. Make a better decision and move back to warm. And I guarantee that every time you take a step, new information comes into your life so that you can make a better step on the next time. And we just get stuck when we don't take any action and when we sit and think everybody else has it easy. And I don't know anybody who has a life that they truly love, who hasn't been through hardship and who hasn't made courageous choices.
That's right. And risks. I mean, a lot of it is risks because we try and behave and do and be as we think society wants us to be, or maybe even in the eyes of what someone else expects or wants us to be. And so it's difficult to kind of buck that system, so to speak. And I'll just say this in general for, let's just say, for men versus women. I think there's a little bit of a difference there. I think men, especially after 10 and as they get into their teens and older, they're being programmed to, you're going to be the breadwinner, you're going to be in business, you're going to, you've got these other responsibilities. So that's what's driving them at the risk of really doing what they love or being who they're meant to be. And then they get a midlife crisis because they realize I'm not fulfilled and there's more to life here. I just feel like men tend to experience that differently than women. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I haven't given enough thought to give a wise answer, but what popped in my mind are the Olympic athletes who meet the pinnacle of success and they go, but I'm still not satisfied. Mm-hmm. And so they have everything that the world says is supposed to make them happy. And there's still something missing. They're still not happy. And that's where you have to begin one more time. What's the next breadcrumb? Because this is where people despair and those midlife crises come. And I know people who have suicided, but they despair when they get to where they thought they wanted to go and it still hasn't fulfilled the longing of their soul. And so it's follow the clue, follow the next crumb. There's something more. There's a next chapter, perhaps.
I like our philosophies because mine aligns with going backwards to move forward, reflecting backwards and doing more self-discovery and what you were doing when you were 10 before the world told you who to be, and then look at your lifeline and then try and find those signs or those clues, probably more physically, stress and kind of like just knowing that something's off or not right and that you need to shift and change. And one thing that you said at the beginning of the call, and I would recommend this to anybody, is therapy, right? There's no need to do this alone. whether it's a clinical therapist who actually changed my life in at least getting me to pay attention to the desires of the heart and getting to know me a little bit better personally. Not her getting to know me, but me getting to know me through her therapy was extremely helpful. And there are a lot of life coaches, a lot of business coaches, teachers, people that have that guide, like kind of like a guide to help you down this path, because it's not easy. I think we're there, so we can look back and say, it was hard and there was failure, but we're there, and it feels like it kind of was easy because I'm finally here.
Yes, and so what my mind says is I don't believe we were designed to go alone. We go further faster when we're with somebody. So I have invested in therapists. I have invested in coaches who are going to get me there faster. I invest in reading. I am all about, I want to live life to the fullest. I get one ride. So I'm going to turbocharge it by bringing people into my life who will help me get where I need to go.
Yeah.
COVID-19 reawakened some fears in me, and I work with a really incredible holistic chiropractor who helps me when I have very intense emotions to get out of those. And so I think that you can go alone, but I don't know how fast you can go and if you can ultimately go to where you want to be. And so I think you're going to want a team of people, and it doesn't mean that you're there with them forever, but I think the beauty of books, the beauty of this day and age where we can do a show like you do, that we don't have to be alone anymore.
No. And so many of my clients enjoy like a mastermind, peer network forum type setting where they can be vulnerable and can get down to a core challenge or issue and have the accountability and the support of others to help them make those shifts and make those changes. So I don't want anyone to feel alone, and that, reach out to other people that have your best interest and love and care about you. And I'm sure you can get the support that you need.
And I do think what you just said sparked something in me. You want to be around people who bring out the best in you, who awaken something in you where you become more alive, and be around people who are risk takers, who will encourage you. Mark Twain said, beware of people who try to belittle your dreams. Small people always do that. But the truly great make you believe that you too can be great. And so whether it's professionally or just who we surround ourselves with, that's what we need to do. And for me, I found the National Speakers Association, and that is how I learned the business. Within that, I learned worked with a business coach. You and I are both part of Power Women of the National Speakers Association. So it's not like I arrived and now I do it all on my own. I love that I can type in a question and I have people who will immediately help me and who will cheer me on.
That's great advice. It's a community, and it's kind of like find your tribe, find your community that has your best interest in mind. Well, I just looked at the clock and we are definitely over our 30 minutes, but I knew it was going to be that way.
Fast and so fun. Thank you.
We're gonna keep talking at some point for sure, and I'd love to have you back on as a guest at some point. I would love to share your contact information if that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the other screen here, and here we go. So what is the best way to reach you? Is it going to your website or follow you on?
Go through the website. You can email me, Sherene at ShereneMcHenry.com, and you can find me on YouTube. But please reach out to me. If I don't have an answer, I bet I can point you in the right direction. I know I can speak for both Krista and I that we want you to live life to the fullest, that we want you to have a marvelous life, and that you can do this. We believe in you. Yeah. And so reach out. I'd be so happy to, if nothing else, point you in the right direction.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time today. And I just want to also make a pretty significant note here. Today is number 81 of the Krista Moore Show, and this is our final show of this series where we are running it through the GoToWebinar platform. I want you to stay in touch and know where to find me, because I'm going to continue to bring guests as inspiring as Dr. Sherene McHenry. And if you follow me on Facebook and YouTube, that's the best two places, because I'm going to be going live socially moving forward. If you miss a recording, you can always subscribe to the YouTube channel and get some great information. And I just want you to know that I care about you and I care about your success. And thank you so much for joining us today.